Welcome to the Progress Texas Happy Hour.
All right, everybody, welcome back to the Progress Texas Happy Hour. Communications Director Chris Mosier here. And at Progress Texas, we always jump at a chance to catch up with our founders. And among them, probably the best known to the public is former Austin Mayor Steve Adler, who led the capital city's local government as mayor for 2 terms. Till he termed out, I should say, for now. Actually, and we'll get back to that. He served from 2015 to 2023, of course, a monumental era in the history of Austin and for the whole country, really, at that time. Mayor Adler is about to drop a brand new book, which is called Hot Seat, Hot City, both of which are totally true. The new book is out on August 25th and all the way from the mother continent of Africa. Mayor Steve Adler, how are you, sir?
I'm doing good, Chris. Appreciate this opportunity to be with you.
Absolutely. So we got tons to talk about, a lot of which, of course, is in the new book, which, as I say, covers, a super transformative period of Austin's history, and I would say that of the entire nation during that time. So much happened during the time you were mayor. But let's start with this trip to Africa that you're on right now. It sounds like the trip of a lifetime. Is this a new adventure, something you've done before? Tell us all about it.
This is primarily a payback trip. This is you disappear for 8 years. This is my apology tour with my wife, Diane.
That's great. So you guys have popped all over the continent, and there's so many of us that will never get to take a trip to a place like that.
It's a neat trip and a neat opportunity. Most of the time we're traveling with Ali Katal, who has an engineering company in town and in Austin. He was one of the recent past chairs of the Austin Chamber of Commerce,
Okay.
but his avocation is photography, and he's wonderful at it. And it's great to go on with a trip with him and learn a little bit.
Very, very cool. Well, enjoy that and be safe while you guys are doing that. Let's get into it here. Your time as mayor of Austin, as I mentioned, happened during a time of pretty cataclysmic change. Both globally, nationally, and locally here in Austin. We saw the beginning of the Trump era during that time, the COVID-19 pandemic during that time. At the state level, there was a conspicuous swing to the right among the Republicans who held the Capitol and still do, and all statewide positions, of course, for a long time here in Texas. But also kind of the beginnings of a resurgence of statewide Democratic effort and progressive effort. The Beto year came in 2018 in particular, while the Republicans kind of began the splintering of factions that many are hoping will lead to change this fall. Before we drill down to Austin, now that we're a few years removed from your time in the grind of city government, as you mentioned, the time that you disappeared from your family, being as busy as you were. How do you remember, kind of in a nutshell, your time as mayor in a general sense, now that you're a few years, down the road from it?
Well, I think you touched on a lot of the things that happened in that period of time, 2015 to 2023, and you listed some of them. We had the George Floyd summer.
Sure.
We had racial reckoning. In that period of time in Austin, we had an anonymous bomber that was killing
That's right.
people on their porches. We had 3 100-year storms that aren't supposed to happen, but once every 100 years, we had citywide water boils. We just don't have that kind of thing in a city of 1 million people. I kept telling my staff that the locusts were just around the corner. We dealt with homelessness in a big way and housing, but at the same time, Austin, magical place. And even though we were not the favorite city of a lot of the statewide leadership, Austin was responsible for, half the venture capital investment in the state, a third of the patents. It's a magical place. We're a real driver of the economy in the state. In part because we were the progressive city in the state. Wonderful cities in Texas. Each one's different in a diversified portfolio of cities. We didn't compete with other Texas cities. We competed with the likes of Nashville and Denver and Seattle. But
Sure.
A magical place. In those 8 years, we were the fastest growing city in the metropolitan area in the country. During that period of time, when I left office, we were more housing starts both in absolute terms and per capita terms than any other city. It really was a golden age for this city. We were leading the nation on a lot of progressive issues, a lot of equity and access issues. The community voted to bring public mass transit to the city. Just an exciting time, exciting place to be, still is, a magical place. But certainly in those 8 years, and the political turmoil, the partisanship, angst that was created in that period of time, coinciding, I think, with Trump's first term and his movement toward a second, certainly changed the political landscape. And you had a lot more people moving into Austin. So that dynamic started showing up on our shores too.
It's interesting to hear you say all that because Austin very much was, at the tip of the spear, during that time. Since then, places like Fort Worth and Dallas, and as you mentioned, some of the bigger cities have kind of caught up in terms of that explosive growth. And so, urban Texas in general, even just in the couple of years since you left office, has generally has become a broader sort of movement and moment that's bigger than any of those individual metro areas. That's interesting to think about. You mentioned in some of your social media promotion for the book that you included not one but two chapters on the homelessness response that happened in Austin in 2019. Speaking of housing, and besides Congressman Greg Casar, who of course at that time was on the Austin City Council, you're the elected official that's most closely associated with that period of time. Of course, we're a statewide operation here at Progress Texas. So for our listeners who are not in Austin, who weren't in Austin at that time, give us the basics of what the city tried to do and what happened, with that particular crisis at that time, to the point where you've got two chapters in your book about it.
Well, in a lot of ways, I am associated with that issue for good and bad. And I spent a lot of political capital trying to work on it. And I did that because, of all the things that were happening in our city, good things, bad things, the single issue that could rear its head in our city that was causing the most disruption and damage in other cities was homelessness. Fast-growing cities, progressive cities, cities not too dissimilar to Austin, like San Francisco and Seattle and Portland, even Los Angeles, with a growing homeless population in those communities that they couldn't handle. That becomes then not only that issue itself, but it begins to take on its own life with respect to public safety and trust in government. It became the most important single issue in elections in Seattle and San Francisco and Portland and LA, still is in those cities. And as I looked around at the landscape to figure out where Austin could be really set back, it was if we didn't do a better job of handling this challenge than those cities did. A lot of people were coming to Austin from those cities because of that challenge
Right.
in that city. And the single largest, most significant correlator to increased homeless population was rapidly rising housing prices. And Austin became the poster child for that. And it became pretty apparent to me, as certain as I knew the sun was going to come up the following day, that if we didn't do something about homelessness in 6 years, we were going to be where Seattle was. And nobody seemed to have the right answer. No one was seeming to really be able to handle that. I went out and visited LA and Portland and San Francisco, not to find out what they had done right, but to ask them, or what they were doing now. I had no idea what you do if you're the mayor of those cities. The challenge is so great, costs
Sure.
so much. But I wanted to know what they, in hindsight, what they wished they had done 10 years earlier, where Austin was, that might have been helped them avoid being where they were. And quite frankly, the answer in all those cities came back to me, and it was the same. What they did was they had policies that hid homelessness. They made it illegal to camp, sit, and lie. Somebody would be out in front of a retail store. The owner would call the police and say, there's somebody out front scaring away my customers. The police would arrive, and they had that tool. They could say to that person out front, hey, you got to move on. And if you don't, we're going to give you a ticket or arrest you. And that person would gather up her stuff and say, hey, officer, please don't give me a ticket. Look, I'm gathering my stuff up. I'll leave. Where should I go? And the officer would look at her and say, I don't know the answer to that.
Right.
Because the
That's
truth
it.
is that wherever she went, she was also breaking the law.
That's right.
And we had no answer to that. But we did have more and more neighborhoods now inviting me to neighborhood association meetings, as upset as any neighborhood I saw anywhere. And I was in some pretty angry neighborhood association meetings on land use policy and code next and other things, but nothing like the angst and anger and frustration in these neighborhood association meetings who were proximate to homeless encampment, demanding that the city do something. And we had no idea what to do. We weren't doing anything. And I would go to those meetings and I had nothing to offer those neighborhoods. So what these other cities said was, hey, we had those policies too. We hid the problem until you couldn't hide it anymore. The police would, threaten, they would move on, they would hide, they would go down by the railroad tracks or down by the creeks until there were just so many, and then it exploded. The problem was that if you waited that long and the problem then exploded, you were too late. Because at that point, the challenge is too big. So how do you get out in front of it? Well, what we did in Austin that was good, I think, was we said, hey, if someone doesn't have a home, the appropriate response of the community is not to arrest them or give them a ticket. It's to help them. We're a rich enough, affluent enough, caring enough place that we can do a better job than that. So we said, we're not going to do that anymore. That's just not the right thing to do. In hindsight, I wish we had done it differently, and there are a lot of lessons to be learned about how we did it. But I'm real proud that our city was one that said, we're not going to hide this. We're not going to, force it into the cracks and crevices of the city. We're going to try and deal with it. And started making really significant progress, started putting real effort, started bringing coalitions together. We increased by tenfold the number of permanent supportive housing units in the city. That the city council after me has gone to a lot of ribbon cutting ceremonies to open up. We didn't do as good a job managing shared public spaces as we should have, so we needlessly created a lot of angst in the community, and ended up losing a referendum on tents. No one likes tents. I don't like tents. You don't want to have tents. And we just didn't handle it, the rollout, as well as we should have. We didn't have any guidance on that. There was not another city we could point to say, let's go do it the way that they did. A lot of folks could go to school on us. But I'm real proud of our community for being one of those communities that says, we're going to take care of the least advantaged among us, because that's a reflection of who we are.
Absolutely. And the opposite of what we see from, our state level leadership and, definitely from federal leadership these days. So yeah, that's a great way of thinking about it, is we were the city who gave it a shot, who took a crack at a really difficult problem. So that's a great way to look at that. So, the COVID pandemic, which is an even bigger problem, clearly. I remember the moment for me. I'd had you on my radio show pretty recently, on the old KGSR back in the time before the pandemic arrived. And in your book, you talk about that moment that for me, for sure, working in music media at the time, that the pandemic got really, really real for me. And that was the cancellation of South by Southwest that year in 2020, which seemed for us at that radio station in particular just a completely surreal moment. Almost the impossible had come, that South by Southwest was not going to happen just mere days before it was supposed to start. Talk about that. You were the guy who had to make that call, that seemingly impossible call, in March of 2020. Talk about what really, I think for a lot of people in Austin, was the real beginning of the COVID pandemic.
Being mayor is a wonderful job and a real gift, from the community. To be kind of trustee and in that role. But it does have difficult moments, and none were more difficult than that. We watched as COVID was moving from the Asian part of the world, and it was
Right.
heading toward us. I was in contact with mayors in the network that I had built in cities around the world, and had a front row seat to what was happening in those cities. Every mayor I talked to told me with unanimity, this is going to hit you faster and harder than anyone's going to tell you, because no one's going to believe what the modelers say, because the modelers have it nailed. It's objective. In fact, we had a modeler here at the University of Texas, Lauren Myers, who was doing modeling for CDC, so she was doing modeling for the federal government. But it basically explained to me how this was in all probability was going to roll out, and the number of people that could die, that probably would die, were just unfathomable. So you just didn't want to believe it, and it just couldn't be true. But yet the mayors I was talking to were all telling me that it would hit. So we had South by that was happening. We had a virus that was beginning to kill people. It was just reaching our shores up in the West Coast, up in Seattle. We have 5,000 people headed our way from Seattle. There was already community transfer happening in Seattle, which means you could get it just walking, in the community, going to a restaurant down the street. It's not just travelers bringing it back in Seattle. You could go there and catch it. And now a lot of those folks were coming here. There were people coming from all over the world coming here. But I was getting lots of different kind of advice. There was people that were suggesting that you just can't have that many people. We needed to cancel it, and really was nothing to talk about. I also knew that if we canceled South by, the economic hit on the city would be enormous. But not just that, but there are a lot of businesses that make their year's profit margin during that 10-day period of time. A lot of workers in those companies would lose their job, and they would lose their medical insurance just as the COVID virus was beginning to hit the city. So you cancel the program to save lives, you're taking insurance away from people who are going to need that insurance. We tried to justify it. We tried to say, well, let's go ahead and still do South by, and we'll be the city that figures out how you do big events in a COVID world, and we'll all stay 6 feet apart, and we'll elbow bump and not shake hands, and we'll wear masks. And somebody has to figure out how to do these events in that period of time. But at the end of the day, I really came to believe that we were just trying to rationalize not canceling the event. And the medical experts, the conversations I was having with mayors and other cities where it hit, all really pointed in the same direction. We had to save lives. So canceled it. The South by folks were just incredibly supportive, and real interested in taking care of the community. New Orleans went ahead with Mardi Gras, turned into a super spreader event.
That's right. That's right.
And people died, in part because of that decision. I made that decision, got blasted on social media for being a progressive, and I mean, who knows what kind of communist plot that was at this point that I was falling for. But within a week, other people were doing it. Mayors, other cities were doing it. It became kind of commonplace.
Yeah.
But we were the first, and it was hard just because you knew the impact it was going to have on so many people, on the economy here. But the whole COVID next year was surreal.
Absolutely, which leads to this next thing, and I don't want to give the impression that your book is crisis after crisis, but that's just kind of a little bit of the tone of your time as mayor. You got to deal with another crisis while that crisis was still going on, when the lights and the heat went out during that very cold February of 2021, Winter Storm Uri. That crisis, in hindsight, has become a bit of a symbol of state-level mismanagement and what happens when energy profits are put far ahead of energy resilience. Tell us what you remember about that ugly week, which until I started preparing for this interview, I'd forgotten that happened right as the COVID vaccine rollout was just beginning to start. So you were dealing with a compounding situation with Winter Storm Uri.
As I mentioned to you earlier, Chris, that's why in our office we just kept waiting for the locusts to come. I mean, they just couldn't be far. They couldn't be far behind.
Yeah.
But you're right. I mean, one, we were dangerously close in that period of time to shutting down the grid in a way that would have taken 2 or 3 months to fire up again.
That's
I mean,
right.
that cataclysmic injury nearly averted, and the political policy in this state was to have really cheap, inexpensive energy, and there's a price to be paid from that. We were not hardening the systems. We were not doing what we needed to do. It's interesting in Austin. We run our own power company, and we were able to keep power coming to the system in the way that other jurisdictions couldn't. And really during that period of time, we should have made a lot of money as the city of Austin because we were able to. We played by the rules. We did more than what we were supposed to do. We were able to step into the market. And of course, the state legislature took all that away from us, or we didn't actually mean that. And now we're going to hold harmless all these other people that weren't protecting themselves, like the city of Austin was. So it was, the people in this state, should be really upset at state leadership for having put us in that position. I will also say that in the city of Austin, we were just overwhelmed. Everybody that hits. You can't get city workers downtown. I mean, everybody that you want to be doing stuff. I mean, I was with the emergency command people. They could get to that office, but just regular people that were out wanting to deliver water or services, or they couldn't get into the city either. And what you saw was an absolutely beautiful thing that happened in that situation, where neighbors start stepping forward to take care of other neighbors. It was communities that were rallying to take care of one another. In the post-mortem of that, as we were learning things that the city could have done better and should have done better, I used to listen to a lot of people back then really criticize the government and saying, the government didn't do this. Our neighborhood had to step forward and do this. And my observation thinking about that and looking at that is that, there are things that will happen in cities that are too big for even government to handle. And the fact that neighborhoods stepped up to help one another in their neighborhood or the neighborhood next door is not a bad thing. It's a good thing. I mean, that's what we're supposed to do at the end of the day, and that's what happened. And the city pulled together and filled gaps and met needs. Kids got the slide down hills, missed some school. It was really disruptive, but we took care of each other, and in ways that not all cities do. Makes you proud to live here.
Absolutely. You alluded real quick, and I wanted to touch on this just because it's so central to what we do here at Progress Texas. The George Floyd situation happened during your time as mayor. And that came along with a great big dose of disinformation that was centered around the entire defund the police idea and concept that definitely flew around, right-wing media, with you and your city government as, being accused of having done so when you didn't. Talk about that phase, and surely you go into your book about disinformation, what it is, why it's dangerous, and why it's important to counter it.
I think that's one of the most important aspect of politics and just life today, is that it's just near impossible to figure out what's true. or to know where to go to get information that's true. Where do you go to get good journalism that will be fair to everyone? That does not mean supporting everybody or justifying everybody, but at least hitting the ball down the middle of the fairway and being an honest broker of truth. Because what people have learned is that lies are effective. Misinformation and going as far as disinformation, where you're actively trying to manipulate the truth, is become an incredibly valuable tool. We have a president right now who says things that are everyone knows are not true, and it's almost been normalized where it's okay if he does it because everybody knows he does it. So what the heck? But we had that period of racial tension. You had not only in Austin but in cities around the country. There was a lot of looking and talking about how we deal with crime and how we deal with race, how we do public safety in cities. In Austin, during the period of time that I was mayor, increased the police budget every year. But we didn't increase the police budget at the same rate that we were increasing the rest of the budget. So rather than having almost 70% of the budget going to public safety, which is how it was when I came into office, it got down to about 63%, even though the budget for public safety went up every year. But we were able to spend a lot more money on domestic violence issues and getting victims out of their homes before they got too hurt. Doing a lot more work with social services and getting people off the street and getting food for people, the things that are the precursors for crime. And during that period of time, there was a call from some parts of our community to defund the police, as there were calls to do that in cities across the country. I don't know anybody in Austin government that wanted to defund police. And I'm not sure I know any city, maybe one or two, that actually did, cut, to a level that could be called defunding. But in this city, there was a call to defund police by about $150 million out of a $400 million budget. So it would have been about a third of the police budget. We didn't do that. We cut about $20 million out of the police budget, out of the operations changing things. Most of that were dollars that had been put aside for unfilled positions on the police force that the police chief said would not be filled over that current year. We took that $20 million and we spent it on what was our most pressing violent crime issue, which was domestic violence, and trying to find a place to get people out of those homes earlier and the like. But about $20 million, I think you could fairly say, that we cut from the budget and redirected to other things that we believed helped with public safety. We took the forensic lab that was problematic in our city. It was not being run well. Tests were not being run well. I had meetings with the district attorney. I was hearing from judges that they just didn't rely on and have faith in the work that was coming out of the forensic lab. And people who might very well should have been convicted of crime were being let go by judges because they didn't believe the forensic evidence that was being supported. So we took that lab and said, they don't have credibility when they go into court to testify because they're the same police that arrested the person. Let's put that under civilian control, but let's not change it. No employees changed, no function changed. We still had the forensic lab. It was still doing all the work that the police wanted done in exactly the same way it was doing the work before, except it improved what it was doing so that it was a credible group again. The operations continued almost exactly as they had continued before. I don't think that qualifies as defunding police, but yet that's That's $40 million that people will say we took out of the police budget. But there was no function change. In fact, of that $150 million, other than the 20 that we cut, the other 130 were things that there was no change in programs. There were no loss of people. There was no loss of personnel. The bulk of that were just things we identified as things we should study about maybe future action. We could consider modifying or changing things. But I remember leaving and going home at the end of that session, that budget session, we adopted the budget, made a $20 million impact, which is about 5% of the police budget. And I saw a tweet that came out from the governor's office accusing us of having defunded police, which I didn't understand. And then I saw a text from one of my colleagues on the council congratulating all of us for having defunded police by 150. So both on the far left and on the far right, everybody started using that, not only in Austin, but around the country to organize and raise money politically. And I was stuck in the middle, raising my hand to the media and saying, I know this is a sexy thing to say, and I know people are trying to message it all around me here, but actually look at what we did. We didn't do that. There are programs that went away. We delayed some pre-cadet classes in the police, but those are cadet classes where they really hadn't changed the curriculum in decades, and all the new police officers were watching videos, showing them crimes and the like. And when you looked at the videos, you realized that everybody who was playing a criminal in those videos was Black or Hispanic, and all the police officers were white. And we said, that's not good. We really need to change the academy to fix that kind of thing. But there was never an attempt or any action to defund police. But yet I still have people accuse me all the time of having defunded police.
Yeah, I recall the first time I heard that slogan come over the TV while I was watching the George Floyd event itself go down. And I remember thinking this is going to be problematic for our political side because of a lot of the things that you're talking about. It's going to be real easy to sling around. And of course it was. Mayor Adler, your book has a foreword written by former Secretary of Transportation Pete Buttigieg, of course, who came to national prominence as a mayor himself, Mayor Pete. Talk about other mayors that have been hitting the national news lately. We're talking, of course, Mayor Zoran Mamdani, who has himself become a big punching bag for right-wing elements in New York City, despite really doing a pretty good job by most, realistic estimates there. We saw Minneapolis Mayor Jacob Frey do a terrific job during the time when his city was under siege with immigration enforcement. On the other end, we've had Houston Mayor John Whitmire, who's had a hell of a time, partly because of the way the state has undermined local control. Talk about what you see with the role of big city mayor in general. That's what in some ways has become more prominent, as this state versus city thing has gone down, or federal versus city thing has gone down in more places around the country.
I think that what you're seeing now, the real political divide in the country, you saw it in the last several presidential elections, is this urban-rural split that exists, where the cities are, the big cities, predominantly Democratic mayors voting for Democratic tickets, rural areas going for rural areas, voting Republican. And we see that in our state. We saw that during COVID. I mean, I was in court, not infrequently with Governor Abbott, which is never a good thing. You don't want that for your city. Cities have to perform in ways that state legislatures and Congress don't. It's the government that's closest to the people. If I wasn't doing my job, I heard about it when I went to the grocery store. And I think people give a certain allowance. They don't really expect the federal government or the state government to do much. But their city government, boy, I tell you, they expect that pothole to get filled or that light to come on, and it's an immediate thing. There is no deficit spending at the municipal level. You have a budget that and you have to stay within you can only spend the money that you have. So I really like seeing mayors across the country now are many of the the, the presidential aspirants that people are talking about this next round. And there are people I think that have a career of getting things done. Pete Buttigieg is a real good example of that. Mayor of South Bend came into a city that was just devastated and dying. I don't remember the quote from Newsweek about South Bend, not very complimentary, when the Studebaker plant went away, and they just never recovered from it. But an innovative, creative guy was able to turn that city around. Young guy became my mentor as when I was a young mayor, a new mayor, and he was an experienced young mayor
Yeah.
in from South Bend. I had the opportunity to introduce him when he initiated his presidential election in South Bend. Back, or that 6 years ago now. But I like that class of mayors that are now getting more and more visibility because they're trying to get things done. There are two different ways to govern, I think, right now. If you look at mayors, there are some mayors that are trying really hard to be really competent, and you see that in kind of the Whitmire or Watson kind of mayor, still trying to take care of people, still kind of, the democratic values, that's their party, but almost retrenching. You also have then mayors that are still, on a mission to improve people's lives and to really treat cities as the incubators of invention, the way that I think Austin was in the 8 years that I was mayor. I mean, let's try new ways, new and different things to help our community. And I think that's the difference that you see between a Mandami and a Whitmire. And fortunately, I'm a member of a party that allows for both of those voices to be there. We're going to see, I think, in this next election. My hope is, I'm a Democrat. My hope is that we're going to have a wave election in November, and maybe we can change not only the House but maybe the Senate. But at that point, the Democratic Party, if it begins to actually have institutional power, it's going to have to wrestle with some of these internal divides, as we see over issues like Gaza.
Right.
We see several elections where the Democratic Socialists, DSA, are winning elections, but yet we have an election, the other night in Wisconsin for governor when there was an upset and the DSA candidate lost.
Right.
We have a party that's trying to figure out who they are. I just hope that the Democrat Party, if it has institutional power again, does not return to the status quo. Because people don't want the status quo. They don't want things how they were. The institutions were not working for most people. The disparity in wealth greatly increasing. The fact that, kids today don't aspire or believe they're going to be able to, perform and then live the life that their parents had. Our vision of the world and the country very different. I think that the Republican kind of trickle down, where if you do really good by a few people, all boats will rise. I don't think we see that working in our country for decades now. But to your question, I think we see a whole crop of new folks coming in that are coming in from the position of mayor, from a position where they had to get things done, where they had to work with all people. The National Mayors Conference is a bipartisan organization. That doesn't happen with the national governors.
No.
They don't meet together. It doesn't happen at the national legislators. But the Conference of Mayors, I was working with mayors all over the country, and a lot of them, I have no idea what their party was. because we were all working together, and we need more of that.
Yeah, I think the difference between, sort of, performative politics and actually having to do the work, like you talked about, that's a lot more central to the role of city government for sure. So speaking of current Austin Mayor Kirk Watson, he's serving his third term after having been termed out after 2 consecutive terms, just as you were. So I think you probably know what my next question is. You're eligible to run again. Would you think about doing that? And if not, do you have a next chapter in politics that you're thinking about?
Well, I certainly don't see another election on the horizon for me. I think Diane would shoot me before before we would do this again. I mean, it was a phenomenal job, and the best job I've ever had, and a gift of the people. But it's definitely somebody else's turn. We have so many young leaders that are coming up, and my hope is to be able to help them. I hope that James can stay in the lead in that race and win it. I think that Gina Hinojosa has actually a real shot at being the next governor. I think you may have talked to her yesterday.
Yes,
I'm excited.
I did talk to her yesterday. Mm-hmm.
I'm excited about her race. And the way that she's performing and the response that the community is giving. And I think that in our city, we need to bring along some of that young talent. I am working a little with Gina. I'm involved in some of the behind the scenes and in political races around the country. I'm a supporter of my longtime friend that you mentioned, Pete, Mayor Pete, and Secretary Pete. So I'll continue to work on races just because it's now in my blood. But I think that that's probably where I can have the biggest contribution.
Very, very good. Former Austin Mayor Steve Adler. The book Hot Seat, Hot City is going to be out on the 25th of August. Mayor Adler, it's always a pleasure, and good luck with the book, and enjoy the rest of your trip over in Africa. That's really cool.
Chris, I really appreciate it, and I hope people will get the book and read it. I tried really hard to give people a feel for what it was like to be mayor. Took them through a lot of the crisis that we had. Tried to do it as honestly as I could, pointing out the things that I'm proud of, but also those things that there are lessons to be learned from, and we could have done better. I tried to do it as honestly as I could, and I'm hopeful that it's a read that people will enjoy.
Very, very good. I think anybody who's lived in Austin for a little while is going to, enjoy that trip down memory lane and maybe get some insight, the kind of behind the scenes of the way that our city has grown and changed so dramatically over the last couple of decades for sure. Thanks again so much, Mayor Adler. This election year, you can support the real free press by investing in pro-democracy, pro-justice, progressive storytelling delivered by Texans for Texans. Join Progress Texas this summer ahead of the midterms and become a monthly donor today, or increase your giving during our summer sustaining donor drive. With your partnership, we can reach more independents, progressives, and young voters, all of whom must be mobilized to win elections this fall. Join the family now at progresstexas.org.